Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Ashburn. I'm the Marketing Director here at Prophesy. And on behalf of the entire Prophesy team, I'd like to welcome you to today's Webinar Wednesday presentation. Today's session will feature the new integration between your Prophesy DispatchSeries software and the popular Macropoint solution, which handles automatic track and trace of brokered loads. Our presenters today are Kevin Pasternack, our own National Sales Manager here at Prophesy, and we are so pleased to also welcome Derin, National Accounts Manager for Macropoint. So we have a lot to cover today, so without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Kevin Pasternack, and he'll get us started.
Carol, thank you very much. And once again, I would like to welcome everybody to today's webinar as well. We've been working with the folks over at Macropoint for a long time on this integration, talking about it, and we're really excited to finally have this ready to release. We've had a couple customers that have been working with it and testing it over the last couple of months, and things have been going excellent. So we're really pleased today to go over really two things. And the first thing we're going to talk about is what is Macropoint. And as Carol said, Derin from Macropoint is with us today. And Ben is going to give you all an incredible overview of exactly what is the Macropoint technology, how does it work. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and do a live demonstration for everybody showing you the integration with Macropoint. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Ben. Ben?
Hey, everybody. Thank you very much, Kevin, for the introduction. I guess first let me just double check. Kevin, can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay?
We certainly can.
Okay, great. So as Kevin mentioned, what I'm going to be doing today is introducing the Macropoint company and product to everyone on the call. And I guess we'll start first with, what is Macropoint? What Macropoint is a load tracking solution. And our motto here at Macropoint is to track every load. It's a state-of-the-art solution designed for third-party shipment-level tracking of owner-operators and outside carriers as well as company fleets. So within your operation, if you're using outside companies to move your loads, this is a technology you're going to use to do so. It's a totally automated solution for location tracking, off-schedule monitoring, as well as arrival departure detection, and we will dive deeper into these features a little bit later in the presentation. There's no hardware purchase required because we do use the driver's existing cell phone, and Macropoint works on virtually all phones, so it is a patented technology process developed by Macropoint. So we really are the only solution out there that can track the location of virtually every cell phone used by drivers today. The product's been built to be scalable for rapid deployment, meaning it can be turned on or off on an as-needed or per-load basis. So that's just a real quick kind of high-level overview of Macropoint. Again, the product that we're going to be talking about today is extremely battle-tested in the marketplace. We have customers ranging from small one-man agent offices all the way up to some of the largest providers in the industry today and growing extremely fast. Give you an idea of our scope of business. We have just about 2,500 customers on our platform and approaching almost 300,000 driver installs using our technology today, and again, continuing to grow extremely fast. So Kevin, why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide here. So let's actually dive into our web portal on how you would actually use the system. And again, Kevin and his team there at Prophesy have done a fantastic job of really fully integrating all the features that you're going to see today from our web portal, so you'll see it be very seamless within your system. But I think just to kind of give you guys a better understanding of what's happening in the background, we'll show you the web portal first. But again, keep in mind, everything you're going to see today is pretty much fully integrated into Prophesy. So to get started, this is our welcome screen here. So when you're wanting to track a load, you'll notice it's a very simple user interface, not a lot of buttons and gadgets and gizmos to get yourself into trouble with. And all your people are going to need to do is just click on Track a Load New Setup, and that will take us to our next page. Kevin, go ahead and go to the next slide here. And that will open up our order form. You'll notice, again, not a ton of information needed to set up tracking. Need the driver's cell phone number, when you want tracking to begin, your unique load number, order number, pro number, whatever your terminology is for a load. You're going to select how long you want to track the load for, and then how often you want to receive updates. So maybe you have an expedite load and you want to receive updates every hour, or maybe if you got something going long haul where you just want updates every 4 hours or whatever your requirements are for that load. Optionally, you have at the bottom here a place where you can input email addresses. And the reason why that's there is because one of the ways we provide you with these location updates is via email. So you can actually put as many email addresses as you want to the order. Maybe you want to update your dispatching group, maybe your customer, or maybe the carrier or dispatcher you're working with. Again, totally up to you. There's also a place for customer notes, or custom notes, I should say, and these custom notes actually get added to the email update that goes out. So maybe you want to put in the lane that you're working on or your customer reference number. That way, if you are sending these updates to your end customer, they know what they're receiving. So once you save the order in our system, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide here. Our system then recaps your order and gives you a status. Now, the status is dynamic, meaning it's going to constantly change throughout the duration of the load. So requesting installation means that the driver that you just set up for tracking currently doesn't have Macropoint installed. So at this point, we need to get them set up. And why don't you go ahead into the next slide here, Kevin. The installation process is very simple. Our system will actually send an outbound message right to the driver. Driver is going to call our toll-free installation number. They're going to agree to use our technology by pressing option 1. We provision the software remotely to their device. It takes less than 15 seconds to do. Kevin, go ahead and go to the next slide. When the driver has set up Macropoint, you can see that the status in our system has changed in real time. So it went from requesting installation to ready to track. And that's how you know that the driver set up Macropoint, has complied, and is now ready to track. Now, once the load starts tracking and actually starting, the status changes again to tracking now, and that's how you know the load is currently in progress for tracking. And at that point, that's when the updates will start to flow into the system. So, Kevin, if you go to the next slide, this next slide is just showing you, how you can go into the portal and actually view the other loads that are tracking in the system. And you can filter and search, and when you find the load that you want the information on, you can see that you just click the View button, and that's going to bring up our mapping page. So, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide. And here's our mapping piece. You can see from the mapping piece the most recent position as well as the breadcrumb trail of the load. And then below the map is the location table that's going to show the timestamp, the city and state. And again, always the most recent update is always at the top with the preceding updates below it. Now, from this map here, you also have the ability to do an on-demand update, and that's in the top right-hand corner in green. And so a lot of our customers, they might be doing a long-haul load and they're getting updates every 4 hours, and 2 hours has gone by since the last update. So, typically that's when a customer calls in and says, hey, appreciate the update a couple hours ago, but need to know where they're at right now. Well, you can actually go here, click on Update Now. Our system will then go out, grab the location of the driver, automatically report it back into the system, as well as generate that automated email update that goes out. And again, all this functionality that you see here is integrated right back into Prophesy. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide. This next slide is really our next set of features here. So everything you've seen so far is the basic tracking. This next slide is talking about two of our other features, which is our off-schedule dashboard. And this is two features in one. So the first thing is it's a 100% automated system to identify loads at risk of missing an appointment. So single and multi-stop loads are constantly being monitored and classified into a scheduled status. So every time that update comes into the system, we're able to see, hey, this load's either ahead of schedule, behind schedule, or can't make it. And if it's ever behind schedule or can't make it, we actually will send you an alert letting you know that there's an issue. Now, because of our great integration with Prophesy, they are sending us your pickup and drop-off addresses, and as well as pickup and drop-off delivery and pickup windows, and that allows us to put a geofence around those locations, and we can now provide automated arrival and departure detection alerts. So you can see that Macropoint is going far beyond just simple tracking. We're now helping you automate the entire track and trace process, which is, again, going to free up a ton of time for a lot of your folks there. So if we go to the next slide here, we'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages of Macropoint. First and foremost, being able to electronically track every load, super important in today's business world. We're pretty much getting to the point where customers are wanting 100% visibility. They want to know where their loads are at, and that's one of the things that Macropoint really helps out, especially in that brokerage 3PL marketplace where you're using outside companies. You can now electronically track those guys and provide better information to your customers. It's also a great tool, as you can see, operationally for your own business. It's going to reduce those outbound, inbound phone calls. If your people can spend less time tracking and tracing, maybe spend more time finding more trucks, booking more freight, do more revenue-generating activities and cost activities. Certainly going to help fill the gap of some of the non-traceable carriers out there. And also is going to help open up a larger pool of available carriers. And what I mean by that is more and more customers are wanting electronic visibility for their freight. So that means for you guys, you typically have to go out and source a carrier that can provide that type of capability. Well, with the capacity out there, those types of trucks and capabilities are shrinking and shrinking. But with Macropoint, because you can deploy it to virtually any truck, any driver, it opens up that pool of available carriers that you can use to move that freight. Certainly, technology is going to help you increase business. When you're going into an RFP situation or going into a sales room when meeting with a new customer, being able to let those people know that, hey, we can electronically track all of your freight for you, whether it's moving on our assets or a non-asset. We can still monitor the load for you. We hear all the time that Macropoint's been able to help increase their score with their shippers. We hear all the time from shippers that, hey, if there's someone's going to be late, we want to hear it from you and not have us call you, let you know your guy's late. And at the end of the day, it's just more reliable information, right? It's automated, it's real time, it's accurate, validated by Macropoint. I mean, I think everyone's kind of heard the same story where driver, tells you, hey, I'm 60 miles out, when really he's, probably 200 or 300 miles out. So those are some of the advantages of using the Macropoint technology. Now, this next slide here kind of shows you, some next steps. If this was something that you were interested in, how would you take advantage of testing Macropoint out with a very thorough test of the solution? We do have a pilot pricing model. It's $300. Very, very small investment to test out. Gives you roughly 60 loads. You can track the system, test the system out. You're going to get all of our unlimited training and support. Again, we're going to show you we're going to train all your people, show you exactly how to use the tool. We're here to help in any way we can. and then after you go through the initial 60 loads, you can either make the decision to continue and then throw in another $300, you know, at no contract, no commitment model, or we can discuss more of a volume pricing option where, you know, based on, you know, what your volume looks like and what your appetite is for a contract, of course we'll make some type of program work for your specific business needs. So that's the presentation from my end. Kevin, I believe this is where you're going to be now showing them the live demo.
Absolutely, Ben, and thank you very much for sharing the Macropoint technology with all the Prophesy users today. And what I'm going to do now is, as everybody can see, I am in the Prophesy software now, and I'm going to go through what really are some very simple steps for you to go ahead and integrate Macropoint with your existing Prophesy software. This is an add-on module to your system, so if you wanted to use Macropoint the way Ben just showed it to you, which was right in their interface, you can certainly do that. And if you're going to do a trial with Macropoint, that's something that you certainly might want to do, is go ahead and sign up with Ben for the trial and use the Macropoint. But then if you decide to continue with it, we would certainly encourage you to add the integration to your Prophesy Dispatch. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes to set up the interface, max. I'm going to go through some of the basic steps with you on that, and I'm actually going to go ahead and assign a load and show you just the entire process. So the first step that you would do is when coming in to set up the Macropoint is you would go into your preferences, the mobile comm, additional settings, and you would see this tab for Macropoint. And when you sign up for Macropoint with integration, you're going to get an email from the team over at Macropoint that's going to have some specific account information for you, and our services team will assist you in copying and putting all of that information right here into the setup. So, and this literally is the majority of the work from a setup standpoint. We're also going to add, if you're not a mobile comm customer currently, we are going to add the mobile comm manager. We'll put that out on your server. The mobile comm manager is just a piece that sits out there that communicates between ourselves and Macropoint. So the only other setup that you would do is you would then go into your carrier file, and you can make, if you want to go in and make all of your carriers Macropoint capable carriers, meaning that you can tender a load or track a load with that carrier via Macropoint, you can do that. Or you can go into specific carriers and set those carriers up as Macropoint carriers. So I'm in 18-wheel transport here, and you can see there's a place here for a mobile device ID, which obviously none of you have today, but with the Macropoint interface that does become visible. And you would go in and you would create one device ID for the entire company, in this case 18-wheel transport. It would go under here under device ID, it would go under the resource, you would simply save it. Now, if you wanted to make all of your carriers Macropoint carriers, you could just come in here and say, for all my carriers, create and assign a Macropoint ID to that carrier. And that would go through your entire database, and it would make all of the carriers where you would have the ability to assign and track with Macropoint with that carrier. So it's really very easy to do this setup. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to go to this load 8719, one that I had previously booked. Once again, you're all very familiar with this. We've got a load here for our customer Albany distribution going from Albany, New York out to Chicago. We can see the information about the load. I'm going to simply click on Assign, and I'm going to go ahead and assign a carrier to the load. I am going to pick, in this case, simply pick Celadon, and we've assigned them to the load. Now, a couple of things you're seeing on this screen. If you've never used our mobile comm before, you're seeing it for the first time. One, next to the carrier name up here, you're seeing this little mobile device. That's telling me that this carrier is a mobile carrier. In this case, that's telling me that they're a Macropoint carrier. I can also see over here to the right where it says track load with Macropoint. Once again, that's because this carrier, Celadon, is set up as a carrier that we can track loads with Macropoint. Now, many of you may already be using the next feature, and that's down here where it says carrier driver and the phone number. So once the actual driver gets in touch with you that's going to be moving the load, if you've used that driver before and you've been using this feature, all you would do is come in here in the list, find the driver, select them, and save it. And as those of you that are using it today know, that will put the driver's name in there and the driver's cell phone number. If you're not using this today, the way you do it is if you want to add the driver, you can just click Edit Contacts and just click Add and type in the driver name and their cell phone number. So you do need the cell phone number because that's where the load, is going to go to that driver's cell phone. Now, if you don't want to make them a permanent part of the database for that carrier, you could actually just type in the cell phone right here as a one-time thing. Once you've got the driver name in there, all you do, and you want to send the driver the load via Macropoint, all you've got to do is click Track with Macropoint, and it brings you right to that order setup screen that Ben showed you just a few minutes ago. However, you'll notice that the screen is fully populated at this point. So instead of keying all that information into your dispatch system and then rekeying all that information into the Macropoint system, we've seamlessly integrated the two. So it's going to have the start time for tracking. You're going to have your account name, the load number. There's going to be some default settings that you're going to have for how long the load is going to track for and how often those updates are going to come in. We've got the origin of the load here and the scheduled pickup time. We can see where the load is going to and the scheduled delivery time. So in order to start to go ahead and process this load with the passive tracking that Ben described, meaning using the geofencing so the driver doesn't have to do anything at all you would do is click Add, and you would click Save the Order. And that load has now been processed, and once again, you're seeing that next screen right here that Ben was talking about. The nice thing is, from this point on, everything that you want to do can be done right in the Prophesy system. There really is no need to go back to Macropoint unless you wanted to do an update like right now on the driver or where the load is, like Ben talked about. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this, and I'm going to close the load. I'm going to come over to Assign Loads, and we can see load 8719 right here. And for 8719, there is a field that you probably don't display currently in your system if you're not using our mobile comm once again, which is your MCM or DMCM status, which once again that's your mobile comm manager. And this is where those statuses that Ben talked about are going to come into the dispatch. So when the load has been received on the driver's phone, we're going to get a delivery receipt, meaning a status update. Once it's ready to track, we're going to get that update. When it's tracking, we're going to get that update. So you're going to see those statuses right here in the program. Like Ben talked about how you have the map in Macropoint. Well, you can always right-click on the load in our system, and you can say map the load, so that you can go ahead and show this load right on the Prophesy maps, and you would see the updates in the program as well. Obviously, this load hasn't been dispatched, so we're not going to see that. The other thing that is nice about this is if you want to, the load can automatically change statuses. So when the driver makes the pickup and breaks the geofence, which is that great technology that Macropoint has implemented, the load can automatically change from an assigned status to an en route status instead of you coming in and changing it manually. If you want to change it manually, you certainly can, and then of course the load is going to show up here as an en route load. In fact, you can see under the status it's ready to track. So that load has been received by that driver's phone. The app was installed on the phone, and it's ready to start tracking that load. From this point on, in the en route, the tracking would start, the load would be tracked, the updates would come in as often as you've got scheduled within Macropoint for those updates to come in. You would see the last check-in, the last city, the last state. All of that information would flow right into your check call screen that you're probably using today in the system to do manual check calls, or maybe you're calling the carrier, getting updates. All of those are going to come in automatically. In fact, If you want the load to go ahead and auto-complete, once again, there's a preference setting that you can configure within the dispatch system so the load will auto-complete as well. At the same time, you're also going to receive a series of email updates from Macropoint that are going to give you status updates on the load as well. And if you wanted your customer to receive those, you could have added those into the order screen that Ben talked to you about earlier. And as complex as the Macropoint solution is, that's how simple it is to use it. You're basically doing one more thing if you haven't before. You're putting the driver with the cell phone number. You're clicking to track with Macropoint. You're saving it, and that's all. Everything will just flow through the system automatically from then on. So that is what we've talked about today. We've talked about the Macropoint system, which Ben went into detail on. We've talked about the integration between the Prophesy Dispatch and Macropoint. Once again, if you'd like to do a trial with Macropoint, you can do that separate. You can then add the interface. I think as you see value and your customers see value and you sell this to your customers, you're certainly going to want to do the integration because it will save you a tremendous amount of time. I just want to remind everybody that we do offer advanced training on your software in general, and I get calls all the time asking about how they can get more out of the software, how they can be more efficient. And we do offer training here in Connecticut. There is web-based training. We can send somebody out to your site. If it's something you're interested in talking about, you can certainly get in touch with your account manager, and they'll be more than happy to discuss those options and costs with you. I want to thank Ben Derin from Macropoint for spending some time with us this afternoon. We look forward, Ben, to working with you for a very long time. I want to thank all of our attendees today for attending this webinar, and we appreciate your business. We look forward to working with you in the future and hopefully adding the Macropoint integration to the program.